Hello, we are live on this beautiful Sunday afternoon from the Big Phil Palace in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. I am the Big Phil combo, Phil Chertok. Joining me, as seems like always, the one, the only Eric Marcotte is here to review all the action from last night's UFC 277. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing great. I mean, it seemed like the show wasn't going to work at the last minute, but miracles happen, and here we are, just 2 minutes late. Not too bad. We've got a full house in the YouTube chat. I got up early. I went to the gym. It's beautiful outside. I'm feeling great.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Got up nice and early at the gym. Had a nice healthy breakfast, and here we are.
That's right. That's right. To lay down all the action from UFC 277, which happened last night from Dallas, Texas, the American Airlines Center. An attendance of 19,442, a massive $4.45 million gate. The UFC can do no wrong, it seems, with their live pay-per-views from a business standpoint. On the call was Rogan, Anik, and Cormier. And before we get to recapping the action, just wanted to get your thoughts on this card and the main event ahead of time. I mean, when the first fight between Peña and Nunes happened, big upset, Peña got the victory. Dana White was adamant that the rematch would be the biggest fight in women's MMA history. How did you feel about this one going in?
I had a feeling that it would not, in fact, be the biggest fight in women's MMA history, but they certainly had more attention attached to it than Amanda Nunes' title defenses in, really any of them in recent memory. And I think you saw by their headlining position on this card that this was about that's had a bit more interest and prestige going into it than some of, like I said, her prior matchups.
Yeah, it had a low-key build, and then it seemed like right around fight week, there got to be a fair bit of excitement. The card itself was a little bit lacking on the name value. We also had a interim title fight for the men's flyweight strap. We'll get to that and the need for the interim belt. But why don't we start with the main event and how that one went down, Eric?
All right, so our main event was Juliana Peña attempting to defend her UFC Bantamweight Championship against Amanda Nunes. Of course, this was the rematch of their fight from December of last year, a fight that Peña won by submission in the second round, one of the biggest upsets in UFC history, really. So, going into this one, Nunes starts the fight by attacking the legal leg of Peña with some heavy kicks as the fighters were trading punches. Nunes seemed to be landing the heavier shots, but Peña was finding success with her jab and a lot of these straight right hands. A counter right hook caught Peña on her way in, and it dropped her to a knee momentarily. This was a sequence that immediately repeated itself, and this counter right hook from Amanda Nunes would become the story of the fight for the next couple rounds. Peña did defend a takedown attempt towards the end of the round before the fighters traded hands, but I thought this was a fairly clear round for Amanda Nunes. We go into the second round, and not long into it, Nunes drops Peña with a hard counter right hand, and Peña gets back to her feet, looking a bit wobbly, and she is just rushing in wildly, throwing strikes with chin up in the air, no defense to speak of, and two more times throughout this round, she gets countered by that right hook from Amanda Nunes and dropped hard. All three times, Nunes allows Peña to return to her feet, choosing not to engage her on the ground. But this was a very one-sided round. I mean, Peña probably technically landed more than Nunes, but her strikes were not having much of effect in comparison to Nunes, who was knocking her down repeatedly. I gave this a 10-8 round for Amanda Nunes. I think it's hard to argue against when you knock your opponent down 3 times. Did you feel the same way, Phil?
I did not. I did not give it a 10-8. So we can go to the mattresses for this one. But I'm a bit of a stickler, I guess. I'm old school with the 10-8s. They were clear knockdowns, but MMA isn't boxing, and I just sort of felt like, as you pointed out, Peña did land more than Nunes in this round, and it's not like her strikes were completely useless. They obviously didn't have the same power as Nunes's, but it wasn't quite that sort of damaging beatdown that I usually give a 10-8 for. So it was clear, it was decisive, but I did not give the 10-8 this time.
Well, maybe if Nunes got 9 knockdowns, then we could reopen the conversation. Don't worry, one of the judges saw it the same way as you. Anyways, getting into the third round, Nunes starts off with a spinning elbow, and Peña's trying to work her way into the clinch, but she can't keep Nunes there. Peña's still pressing forward with strikes, but the counter shots from Nunes are largely keeping her at range. Around the midway point of this round is when this fight really changed levels, as Nunes decided to change her approach, instead taking Peña down. She spends the majority of the round working from Peña's guard. Peña is actually fairly active off of her guard, chasing submissions, but none of them are that close to actually catching Nunes. And the damage is being done from Nunes in top position, dropping huge elbows that are cutting Peña open. I thought this was another fairly clear round for Amanda Nunes. We go into round 4, and I thought this was, for what it was, the most exciting round of the fight. Peña is quickly taken back down, but this was, so as I said, she's very active off of her back chasing submissions, but this was as close as she came to actually securing one, because at one point she went after an armbar, I believe, and she had Nunes actually in a pretty great position, but the problem was the fighters were very close to the cage, and Nunes is a skilled grappler herself. She escapes the position, or she retains top position, and she really starts pouring down the ground and pound. Juliana Peña, just a bloody mess by the time she finally makes it back to her feet. Nunes takes her right back to end the round. I thought this was the closest round of the fight, but I still scored round 4 for Amanda Nunes. How did you see it, Phil?
Yeah, I saw it the same way. There was just too much damage from the top position. I mean, the armbar was very close. It looked like it was super tight. And, she had a couple of attempts at some sweeps, some omoplatas, some triangles, but ultimately none of those were effective, and it didn't do that much damage. One thing to note that was, I think, a key component to this fight was, from the first fight, the activity off of Peña's back really wore on Nunes. Peña was active here, but she wasn't nearly as effective as she was in the first fight. And Amanda herself was able to land a lot of damage. And I think that was actually the big key to this fight. Just even though Peña was extremely active off her bottom, it didn't have the effect of deteriorating the cardio of Amanda Nunes like it did the first time.
Well said. We get into the final round, and Nunes once again takes Peña right back down. I think Nunes attempts a choke at one point at Darce, perhaps, and Peña pops back to her feet, but she gets taken right back down. The majority of the rest of the round gets spent here. At one point towards the end, Nunes kind of throws a diving right hand that seems like it hurt Peña, but she takes Peña's back, locks in a body triangle. Peña does escape, and the fight ends on the ground. Amanda Nunes wins by unanimous decision, scores of 50-45, 50-44, and 50-43 to win back her UFC bantamweight championship. She is once again a double champion. I scored the fight 50-44 for Nunes. I'm assuming you're 50-45.
Yeah, that's right. There was no other round that warranted a 10-8 either for me. But just a really terrific performance from Amanda Nunes. And in that 5th round, she was trying to finish the fight in the last minute. It seemed like she just made a calculated decision to really go for it. She even went for crucifix at one point. So clearly the cardio question, quote unquote, for Amanda Nunes was answered. That was my biggest concern going into this one. Even in fights that she had that were 5 rounds, like against Valentina Shevchenko or some of her other title fights, you could see her. The Valentina ones were very slow and methodical, so they weren't terribly taxing from a cardio perspective. And some of the other ones, she did get tired, but she was so much superior than her opponents that she was able to withstand that, and it didn't really play a factor. So I had this idea in my head that there was a history of fatiguing, and I knew Juliana Peña was going to be there for all 5 rounds, which she was. I mean, in a great display of resilience, but Amanda Nunes came in super prepared conditioning wise, and that allowed her to use all of her skills. And I think that's the true story of the fight. It was actually a tremendous mixed martial arts performance because she won the fight everywhere.
Yeah, I feel like prior to Nunes actually becoming a champion back at UFC 200, one of the narratives in her career was that she was a fighter who gassed as the fight wore on, typically in 3-round fights even. As her career has progressed, that narrative has lessened, obviously. She's shown impressive cardio in 5-round fights against fighters like Felice Spencer or Raquel Pennington. But after the last fight, my concerns were the same as yours. Seeing her gas out that quickly against Juliana Peña, obviously she had a severe bout of COVID-19, which that's impacted a ton of athletes cardio-wise. So she seems to have fixed whatever was ailing her in the last fight, and this was a very dominant one-sided fight. Whenever you have fighters who are 1-1, especially in a division where there isn't a lot of big names, the option of going straight towards the trilogy bout comes up. Personally, I thought this is a one-sided enough fight that I really have no interest in an immediate third fight. That being said, there's not a lot of options in the division. I think Ketlen Vieira is the only other sensible name, and I do think that's the direction that they'll probably go in next, but it would not shock me if they did the trilogy fight next either, Phil.
No, it wouldn't shock me because of the lack of names. I mean, this did a huge gate. I'm not sure that's really because of cat attack here. Cat attack, get away. I'm not sure that's really because of, Nunes and Peña as a draw, as it's more about, just the UFC pay-per-view brand. Like you don't have to put a name on a card, and you're pretty confident they're going to get a sellout. So yeah, I mean, it's slim pickings though. Like Ketlen Vieira is not a big name either, and so the prospects of that drawing terribly well are I don't see that being the case. Now, perhaps Amanda Nunes, her star has grown. This adds to the lore, right? Now reclaiming the double champ status. So it will be interesting to see what the pay-per-view buys are for this. I am a bit curious, but I'm not terribly enthusiastic about what they might be, especially considering the other names on the card. One thing to note that I neglected was that Amanda Nunes started an entirely new camp for this fight. Her own team, it's completely focused on her. It's more of like a boxing style of preparation. And, clearly it paid dividends. She had renewed excitement for the fight game. And so I some people were speculating that she may consider retirement, but I get the impression that, she's going to continue fighting and wants to just maintain that dominant status. Of course, a lot of people are going to be asking about a potential third fight between her and Valentina Shevchenko. And as exciting as that would be for me, it does seem like Valentina Shevchenko is also committed to stay in the flyweight division. She doesn't seem to express too much interest in moving up. So, outside of Peña and Vieira, it really is slim pickings for opponents for her. There's no one at 145. And, Kayla Harrison is locked up for at least a couple more years. So not really too sure what you can do with Nunes other than those, 2 fights, but they're not terribly compelling to me.
No, they're not compelling to me either. But two fights. Let's just say theoretically, both of those fights happen in the next year and a half. Well, maybe the narrative will change in that time. Dana White did express interest in that third fight between Shevchenko and Nunes. That is the one fight that would draw money, right? That's the one. It didn't last time, but neither Shevchenko nor Nunes were on the level of star power that they are now. I do think that's a fight that a lot of people would be interested in. I'm not optimistic about it actually happening, but that's what we're looking at right now in the UFC women's bantamweight division and the UFC women's flyweight division and the UFC women's featherweight division. That's the reality of the situation there.
The featherweight division. Can you name me some other fighters in the featherweight division?
Yes, of course. Jocelyn Edwards and Amanda Nunes, and sometimes Holly Holm, and sometimes Jermaine the Random Man. Aspen Ladd made the move up. Come on. The stack division.
Well, we could go on all day listing female featherweights, but we don't have that kind of time. So why don't we move on to the next fight on the card? Another rematch, this time between Brandon Moreno and Kai Kara France. Moreno getting the victory the first time. This, for some reason, was for an interim title. I mean, the Moreno had just lost title match this year. I think it was the end of January, so we're like barely 6 months removed from that. But the champ Figueretto is injured, so he can't fight until, I don't know, the fall, presumably. So interim title, 5 rounds. Let's do it.
This was up there with one of the most nonsensical interim titles that have ever been dished out. Davidson Figueretto won the title a few months ago. He will fight again this year. Just a really strange decision. That being said, I think a lot of people were interested in this fight between Brandon Moreno and Kai Kara France. I think that was the standout when we looked at this card on paper. You mentioned that this was a rematch of a fight from 2019, a fight that Moreno won by unanimous decision. I didn't remember that fight at all. I went back to watch it this week, and it was a really good fight. But I could have sworn this fight never happened prior to this week when they started advertising. Like, oh, what do you mean Brandon Moreno versus Kai Kara France 2? 2? No.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with just both of these fighters have sort of reinvented. Well, I wouldn't say reinvented themselves, but like emerged as big time players since that fight. Like when that fight happened, they were like way lower ranked. No one was really considering either for a title shot. Moreno just sort of developed some momentum, being, from Mexico and having that fan base and just also being just like an awesome personality. He was able to get that title fight win, or well, it was a draw. Then
draw, win, loss.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So, those series of fights elevated his status. And then Kai Kara France had been really going on a run lately, looking just absolutely tremendous. Of course, defeating my man, Askar Askarov, and that cementing his title hopes. So why don't we just get to the action and let us know how it went, Eric?
Moreno's working his jab to begin the fight. Kai Kara France catches Moreno with an accidental low blow. Momentary pause in the action, but Moreno does not take much time to recover. Kai Kara France is largely waiting to counter, but Moreno's fighting very patiently. He's pulling ahead in terms of general activity because he's getting in, he's landing his shots, and he's pulling back before Kara France can respond. A big left hand from Moreno is the most significant shot of this opening round, kind of knocking Kara France's head back. Right before time expires, Kara France connects with a strong right hand of his own, and he proceeds to successfully defend a deep takedown attempt from Moreno before time expires. We go into the second round. Moreno ducks under a head kick, and he presses Kara France against the cage in search of a takedown. Kara France defends the attempt, and he creates some separation to escape the clinch exchange. Cara France, I did think he was having trouble creating his own offense. Not that he wasn't landing at all, but I thought he was finding most success on the counter. Whenever Moreno got overly aggressive, he was responding well and doing good work. But when they were standing at distance, he was having a lot of trouble finding his range. I thought this was a closer round than the first, but we get into the third round, and I thought the third round was actually Cara France's best round up till a certain point. Cara France sweeps Moreno to the ground early in round 3. He begins to work from the guard of Moreno. He actually cuts Moreno open with ground and pound, but Moreno escapes to his feet shortly thereafter. Cara France is landing really strong strikes on the feet in this round, and while the activity was still there for Moreno, it seemed like the power advantage was leaning towards Cara France. Moreno catches Cara France with a clean left uppercut at one point before tagging him with a spinning bag fist. And then we get to the finish of the fight because Brandon Moreno lands a strong kick to the body that just drops Cara France. And Cara France just turtles up on the ground in complete agony. Moreno follows him down and he just throws down ground and pound. But the fight's over from the moment the body kick landed, really. The fight gets stopped at 4 minutes and 34 seconds of round 3. Brandon Moreno wins by TKO, and he is now the interim UFC flyweight champion. What are your thoughts on the way this fight played out, Phil?
Yeah, the first round was a little bit slow, a lot of feeling out. I did give it to Moreno, but I thought it was super close. Like, I didn't really have a problem with somebody who scored it for Cara France. It was funny, you said that Moreno landed the biggest strike of the round. I actually thought that Cara France had the biggest strike of the round, and that was sort of the difference. Well, it wasn't the difference maker, but it was the reason why I could see it going his way. The second round, I thought, was a lot clearer for Moreno. Although it's funny, the debate online, people were starting going back and forth about that one. But I just found that Moreno was getting into his groove, and like you were pointing out, Cara France was just being a little bit too defensive and not creating his own offense. And then the third round, yeah, Cara France was really starting to find his groove, seemed to be landing a lot, creating his own offense. But then the body shot just silenced all that and put a quick end to what was turning into be a pretty exciting fight. And in fact, this fight ended up getting Fight of the Night honors from Dana White, and well worth it. Well worth it, I thought. So now this sets up the obvious rematch, the fourth fight between Brandon Moreno and Davidson Figueretto. Davidson Figueretto came into the cage afterwards, and they had what was supposed to be a heated, I guess, stare down, but it turned into a little kumbaya session as both men expressed their respect for each other. Figueretto said it's his night, he's the champ, which is sort of weird, even though he's holding his his non-interim title around his shoulder. But I think that this is, the first three fights were great, so I'm okay with seeing this one again. I'll be looking forward to it, and just really curious to see what adjustments Moreno can make. And Figueretto really also looked so much better in the last fight that I can only imagine him continuing to improve. So I'd be looking forward to it. Sounded like they're aiming for December for that one.
Yeah, there's a lot to break down with these guys' three fights to this point. I mean, the first fight, in my opinion, the greatest fight in UFC flyweight history. Just a brutal brawl between these guys. And I thought the first fight was Davidson Figueiredo's best performance. Yes, the fight ended in a draw, but I scored it for Figueiredo regardless. And the only reason anyone scored it was as a draw was because Figueiredo was deducted a point.
That's right.
Now we get into the second fight. Moreno dominates Figueretto. Figueretto looks off, and Moreno looks fantastic. Wins Figueretto's championship. We go into the third fight, and this is a very close fight from the beginning till the end. The difference maker ultimately being Figueretto's power, rocking and dropping Moreno 2 or 3 times to decide close rounds. So I'm interested to see how Figueretto looks in the fourth one. I think we know what to expect from Brandon Moreno at this point, but Figueretto a bit more of a question mark, given just the roller coaster of performances that he's given throughout these three fights. It was funny.
I was just going to say that he also has the history of weight cut issues, although that did look to be resolved in the last fight, but you never know how those can creep up again, depending on what types of injuries he might be dealing with during training camp and other factors. So a lot of questions going into that fourth fight, which is kind of crazy to say because usually 3 fights settles things pretty clearly, but not so much in this case in what will go down as the greatest rivalry in flyweight history.
I imagine for Davidson Figueretto, this must be the first time in the history of high-level MMA that one fighter has fought another fighter 4 times in a row.
That's right,
There's been nobody in between for Davidson Figueretto. Brandon Moreno got this one against Kaikar of France because Figueretto was injured, but it's going to be 4 in a row for Davidson Figueretto. I cannot think of any other example of that.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. All right, so something to look forward to in the fall and winter. All right, moving down the card, we have Texas's favorite son, Derek Lewis, taking on Sergey Pavlovic.
So this is a very short fight. Pavlovic is pressing forward from the beginning, and he rocks Lewis with a big right hand. He realizes Lewis is hurt, and he just goes on the attack, swarming Lewis with strikes against the cage. Eventually, Lewis kind of just face plants to the ground, and referee Dan Murgliata stops the fight. Lewis gets right back up, and the crowd is infuriated with the stoppage. But Sergey Pavlovic wins at 55 seconds of the very first round. Obviously, this was the talk of the night almost, the stoppage, the controversial stoppage, which I feel like it's been a while since we got one of these, one that really sets the internet and crowds aflame. And Joe Rogan was just furious. But let's talk about it, Phil. Let's get your thoughts first. And
sure. Yeah, let's talk about this bad quote-unquote reffing and not the horrible stand-ups that we saw during the other fights. Was Derek Lewis in a position to continue? Absolutely. If you look 10 seconds after the stoppage, it's pretty clear that it was not the right call. But as you pointed out, Lewis did a face plant. And when you land face first on the ground after taking successive shots, the ref's job is to protect you. And I can totally understand how Big Dan saw that as him being flatlined. It wasn't the case, and it was, incorrect, but I'm sympathetic to it. So I don't think it was like the worst stoppage of all time, but it's just really unfortunate because it happened so quickly in the fight and we really didn't get to see the action played out. And it was fireworks from the get-go.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean, it was the wrong call, but I think it's a very understandable call. Whenever someone is badly hurt and they fall basically face down to the ground, you're in that split second, you have to make a choice. And Dan Murgliata made his choice. In most cases, it would have been the right choice, I think. It wasn't this time. That being said, even if this fight did continue, I think Derek Lewis, 99% chance this guy is getting knocked out in the next 10 seconds. He is badly hurt, and Pavlovic was not slowed down. He's just going to hit this guy with right hands until his consciousness left his brain. So I'm taking nothing away from Sergey Pavlovic here, who did exactly what he needed to do. Barely got touched by Lewis. He got cut by one looping left hand, I think it was, that kind of grazed him open near the head, but he was in no trouble, and he had no trouble dealing with Derek Lewis in this quick fight.
Yeah, and in regards to the future of these fighters, Derek Lewis will remain, a popular fighter. I'm sure he'll be on another pay-per-view event, and he'll be a notable fighter on the main card. People are always excited to see him. But Sergey Pavlovic, a lot of people didn't know who he was prior to this fight. And even though there's controversy surrounding it, a big win over a big name. What would you like to see the UFC do with him next?
Pavlovic is in a very interesting spot. So if memory serves correct here, he comes into the UFC undefeated. He's finished most of his opponents in the first round. And in his UFC debut, he gets Alistair Overeem. It's a very tough matchup. And Overeem just takes him down and quickly beats him in one of the most brutal ground and pound knockouts that you'll ever see. And I can say personally, I saw that fight foolishly thinking, okay, this guy's he doesn't really have much to offer. Well, since then, he's had 4 or 5 fights in the division, and he's knocked all of his opponents out in the first round. This guy's clearly a very dangerous and very exciting fighter. And a win over Derek Lewis is a big one. He's going to be ranked as a top 10 fighter in the division after this. It's too bad that Tai Tuivasa is locked up with Cyril Gane next, because I think Sergey Pavlovic versus Tai Tuivasa would be a hell of a fight.
Oh, you want to jump him that far up the rankings, eh?
Yeah, it's heavyweight, sure.
Okay. Well, right now, so right now he's ranked 11, so he's definitely going to jump up after defeating number 5 Derek Lewis. What's going on with Volkov? Why not Volkov? Did they want to put two Russians together? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I often forget about Alexander Volkov. I don't know what he's up to. What's he been up to lately?
I don't know. Let's go check out his Instagram.
Yeah, let's go check out what's Alexander Volkov done in recent memory. I remember him losing to Tom Aspinall in like a minute, but I think he came back and beat somebody in quick fashion. But for the life of me, I can't remember who it was or when it was.
Oh, well, that's sort of telling of the state of the UFC heavyweight division.
I got it. He beat Jairzinho Rosenstrike in 2 minutes.
That's right.
That's his last fight, coming off a win.
And that actually makes perfect sense. Rosenstrike's a big puncher. He beat him quickly. Derek Lewis is a big puncher who got beat quickly. So let's put the two Russians to fight each other.
I'm down.
All right, moving down to the next fight on the card. Alexandra Pantoja versus Alex Perez.
All right, main event time. The fight starts, and Alexander Pantoja, this guy just comes swinging hooks like a complete lunatic. He has no regard for Alex Perez's power, and he backs him up quickly. He takes him down, and he grabs Perez's back as Perez is trying to get himself back up. Pantoja is looking for a rear naked choke. He can't get the arm under the chin, but guess what? He doesn't have to. He just cranks the neck in the most brutal, uncomfortable fashion possible, and Perez taps out. So Alexandra Pantoja wins by rear naked choke at 1 minute and 31 seconds of round 1. Oh my God, what a performance!
Absolutely. I mean, you sometimes hear the term "he big brothered him." He big brothered him here. He just had no respect whatsoever for Perez. Just walked through his shots when he took the back. Just had a vicious body triangle, and as you said, just no choke needed. Face crank, neck crank, jaw crush, all in one. Just no way that Perez was going to survive that. His body was being twisted in all sorts of perverse angles, and just an eye-opening performance for Pantoja, who's one of the most exciting fighters in the flyweight division. A key spot. If the next flyweight title wasn't booked. He made a strong case for himself. So I suspect we're going to see him featured on another prominent flyweight card, maybe that title fight, because if somebody pulls out, he would be an excellent replacement, and he's a natural candidate to be next in line.
Yeah, Pantoja is in a very interesting spot amongst the top-ranked fighters in the division. I believe he has losses to Davidson and Figueretto and Askar Askarov, but he's beaten Kai Kara-France and Brandon Moreno in the same week on The Ultimate Fighter, and he's beat Brandon Moreno again since then. So theoretically, if Figueretto was out due to his injury for an extended amount of time, then you can immediately sell the narrative. This guy's beat Brandon Moreno twice. So there's something to be said for there. And he cut a very impassioned post-fight promo saying, hey, I'm the best fighter in this division. I've beat both of these guys who are fighting for the interim title later in this night, and I did it easily. So a hell of a night for Alexander Pantoja.
Yes, and he was rewarded with a performance of the night bonus as well. So a very good night for Pantoja. All right. And opening up the card, we have Mr. Apex himself, Anthony Smith, taking on Magamed Ankalive, one of the wildest lines ever. Ankalive, a minus 600 favorite to Anthony Smith's plus 450 dog. I mean, we talked about this last night. I thought Ankalive was a clear favorite, but what is that? 5-1, 6-1? I don't know, a lot to 1. And it's kind of disrespectful to Anthony Smith, who had looked very good in his last few fights.
I was surprised by the line too. I mean, don't get me wrong, Ankalive has been racking up win after win, but since moving to ranked competition, he's definitely looked not as impressive as he did on his way up. His fights against the likes of Volkan Ozdemir, I believe, and Thiago Santos have hardly been particularly impressive. So going into this fight, yes, I favored him, but I was shocked by the line as well.
All right. So how did the action play out, Eric?
The fighters are exchanging leg kicks to begin the fight. Both men eventually start throwing their kicks to the body, but neither guy is terribly active, and the fans in attendance are voicing their displeasure with the pace of the fight. Roughly 90 seconds remaining in the round, Ankalaev partially connects with a head kick before tagging Smith with a heavy leg kick. Smith goes for a leg kick of his own, and well, we'll get into it, but he falls to the ground and he chooses not to return to his feet. So the last like 60 seconds of the fight is just Ankalaev throwing leg kicks down at Anthony Smith. We go into between rounds. Smith tells his corner that his ankles hurt. To start round two, they trade leg kicks, and it's clear that Smith can hardly stand on this leg, so he shoots for a takedown. It's not a good attempt. Ankalaev easily stops it and puts Smith into a compromised position on the ground. He postures up and starts throwing down some brutal ground and pound shots. Smith is hurt and really incapable of doing anything to escape from the position. So Magamed Ankalive wins by TKO at 3 minutes and 9 seconds of the second round. The injury was unfortunate, but that's MMA. It's not like it was a freak accident. Ankalive was checking leg kicks, and that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is what the third event in a row with a fight that ends due to injury. Thankfully, it was not the main event, but very unfortunate for Anthony Smith. I mean, really, until that last 60 seconds when he went to his back of the first round, it was anybody's round, and it could have gone to Smith. I ultimately gave it to Ankalaev. I thought Smith was looking fairly good, had good movement, but sort of proving the point that the line was ridiculous. But unfortunately, the injury happened. He tried his best to work through it, try to get a takedown, but clearly too much pain and discomfort to bear. And so now Ankalaev moves up into pretty close to title contention.
He's won 9 consecutive fights after dropping his UFC debut to Paul Craig, a fight that he was easily winning until he got Paul Craig with a second left in the fight. So, I mean, this guy he's lost very few rounds. He's lost even fewer fights. He's on a massive win streak, and really, it all depends on the UFC's direction, because I have a feeling that the UFC is going to go with Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira 2 next, which leaves Jan Blachowicz and Ankalaev as our 2 top contenders. Blachowicz coming off of a win, and obviously with Ankalaev coming off of this large win streak, I wouldn't be surprised if these 2 fighters face off in what would be really a number 1 contenders bout before actually fighting for the title next.
Yeah, that makes the most sense. And if it were to go in the other direction, if they do choose to do not give Glover the rematch, then you can do Glover versus Ankalaev as well. All right, so that wraps up the pay-per-view portion of the card, but there were some other good fights on the preliminary card that I think are worth talking about. And so the sort of headliner of the preliminary card was a welterweight class between Alex Morono and Matthew Semelsberger. Semelsberger, somebody with a fair bit of hype around him. Morono, somebody that we kind of sleep on, but he'd won 3 in a row and looked very good in those fights.
I agree. I think he did look good. He got a big win over Donald Cerrone, which isn't the most impressive name if you've actually seen any of Donald Cerrone's last 7 fights, but still a very big name in the sport. Definitely the biggest win of his career to that point. I recall he had a competitive fight with Anthony Pettis, although Pettis did win that one, I believe.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, my mistake.
But yeah, Morono has been making a name for himself as of late, and he was rewarded with a big spot on the prelims against Matthew Semmelsberger, who's been a bit inconsistent, but when he's looked good, he's looked very good, picking up some big knockouts quick in some high-profile bouts.
Yeah. So just going down Morono's, he had won 3 in a row. So that Anthony Pettis fight was before the Cerrone fight. So we were both kind of right on that. Well, how'd the action play out, Eric?
Morono connects with a looping right hand over the top early in the fight. A short left hook from Morono finds its target, and it's putting Semmelsberger on the retreat momentarily. Semmelsberger attacks the league leg of Morono with kicks before pressing him against the cage in search of a takedown. Morono is able to stay on his feet, and the fighters trade elbows as they broke away from the clinch. Morono lands a big looping right hand, and afterwards, Semmelsberger's left eye is swelling heavily. Scored the first round 10-9 for Morono. We get into the second round, and Morono is working his jab throughout the opening minute. Semmelsberger is caught by a big right hook following a spinning back fist attempt. And Semmelsberger is really having trouble getting going here because Morono is really taking control of this fight, largely behind his jab and those looping right hands. The right hands in particular were really piling up, and this was another fairly clear round in his favor, despite a late takedown from Semmelsberger. We go into the third round. Semmelsberger's corners told him, you need to finish to win this fight. And you know what? He comes in and he's determined to get that finish because he throws a big flying knee and Morono is hurt. Unfortunately for Semmelsberger, that is, he's unable to keep Morono down on the ground. And Morono's actually able to get back to his feet despite being hurt, and he seems to have recovered. He goes back to working that jab, and Semmelsberger slows down as a result. I should say Semmelsberger's left eye is like completely swollen shut by like the midway point of round 2, so he can't see any of these shots coming. They traded like heavy right hands with about 90 seconds remaining in the round, and they wrestled in the clinch until time expires. Alex Moreno wins by unanimous decision, scores of 29-28, 29-28, and 30-27. I saw 29-28 for Morono. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, I had it the same way. Kind of perplexing how you could give that third round to Moreno, considering that Semmelsberger almost finished the fight, and even when it did get back up to the feet, like it was very competitive. Semmelsberger was still doing okay. Moreno did sort of have some moments in the last minute of the round, but not enough to give it to him. Nonetheless, he deserved the victory. A very solid performance. Semmelsberger showed a lot of, fortitude, and he never gave up despite not being able to see out of one eye. I'm curious to see how he rebounds. He had some trouble finding his range early in the fight, and then later he was able to close that distance. I think he found his jab and wasn't missing as much. He also landed quite a few leg kicks that I think helped him navigate that as well. But for Alex Morono, another win. He's I don't know how far he is from being ranked, but it can't be too far.
Yeah, he's probably not far off. I mean, I don't know what Morono's ceiling is at welterweight. He does have a lot of flaws in his game that makes me think that the ranked competition might be a bit tough for him, but I think he's earned the opportunity to prove people like me wrong at this point after 4 consecutive wins against decent competition.
Exactly. All right, so next up we had a great fight between Drew Dober and Rafael Alves. Drew Dober has been in just barn burner after barn burner, and this one was no different.
Yeah, both fighters are just throwing big strikes early, clearly looking for quick finishes. Alves eventually changes levels, and he's successful in bringing Dober down to the ground, where he begins to work from half guard. The crowd, they hate this. They hated grappling on this card, so they're just, stand them up, stand them up. But Mike Beltran opted to let him work, and Dober was eventually able to escape to his feet without the referee assistance. The fighters were swinging wildly back on the feet, and it felt as though it'd only be a matter of time before one of these shots just ended the other's night. But this round did reach its ending, and I did give it to Dober as towards the end of the round, I thought he really pulled away by just teeing off on Alves against the cage. We get into round 2, and it's kind of going around the same way. Dober's pushing forward and just throwing constant strikes at Alves against the cage. to Alves's credit, he's doing a good job of avoiding the majority of the damage, showcasing some slick movement as he danced and taunted and put on a show for the crowd. But I didn't think he was landing enough of his own in return, and as a result, Dober was pulling ahead in the fight. We go into round 3. Alves shoots for a single leg, but Dober manages to defend the attempt, and he throws this big left hook to the body that just drops Alves, and the fight's immediately stopped. Drew Dober wins by TKO at 1 minute and 30 seconds of the 3rd round. Beautiful body shot finish, fun fight, and excellent performance.
Yeah, excellent performance and a fight of night win or performance of the night bonus for Mr. Drew Dober. So another scintillating turn of events. I think I accidentally banned Scott Michael Ferry.
You did.
Oops. Okay, well, we'll pay him back in some other way. He asked for it, sort of.
Poor Scott just wants to support us and MMA and the Post Wrestling Network, and now he's banned for life.
I'm sure I'll figure out how to remove the timeout as soon as the show's over. Sorry, Scott. Please forgive me. Yeah, so great performance from Drew Dober. Somebody, he's been in there with some high level fighters, hasn't got the W. You can kind of see where his ceiling is at, but he's in such exciting fights that, he's always going to be somebody that they, put on a card to generate some buzz. And he even said it after the fact. He wants to be in exciting fights. He turns down boring fights, and, he's got a record to show that. All right, so just rounding out the rest of the card, we had a heavyweight bout between Hamday Abdel Wahab defeating Dontel Mays. This was Abdel Wahab's debut in the UFC. Greco-Roman wrestler, Olympian from Egypt, first Egyptian apparently in the UFC, and he had a pretty impressive performance in a very sloppy but fun heavyweight contest. You also had Drakkar Klose defeating Rafa Garcia by unanimous decision. And then on the early preliminary card, Michael Morales defeated Adam Fugit by TKO in round 3. Jocelyn Edwards defeated Ji Yun Kim by split decision. Nikolai Negumereanu defeated Ihor Potera by TKO in the 2nd. And Orion Koche defeated Mike Mathitha by decision, unanimous decision. I didn't get a chance to see the early preliminary card. Was there anything that stood out, Eric? Anything somebody should go back and watch?
If there is something that stood out from the early preliminary portion of this card, I've long since forgotten, because this all happened like 20 hours ago, and there's been like 10 fights since then. So just read the results and decide for yourself if that's something you want to see.
Yes. All right. So coming up, and I did mention, so once again, the performance of the night bonuses, Drew Dober, Pantoja, and fight of the night between Moreno and Kai Car-France. Kind of hard to imagine that Amanda Nunes didn't have a performance of the night, because it was pretty spectacular.
She didn't get the finish. She didn't get the finish, and that's what you get those performance bonuses for.
Touche. All right. So coming up next week, the UFC returns to the UFC Apex for a scintillating bout between Thiago Santos and Jamal Hill. Vicente Luque versus Jeff Neal is also on the card. That's a pretty good fight. Anything else of note? Augusto Sakai versus Sergey Spivak. Oh, Sam Alvey returns. Our Discord's favorite fighter, Sam Alvey, returns, taking on Michael Oleksiejczuk. So that's coming.
Card's horrible.
So that one's coming up. The following week, you've got Marlon Vera versus Dominic Cruz from San Diego. So that one should be pretty exciting. And then John Pollock, remember him, MMA fans? He returns to the UFC post show, as him and I will be reviewing UFC 278. Usman versus Edwards 2. This card's looking pretty good right now. You've got Usman versus Edwards in a long-awaited another rematch. Edwards finally getting his title shot. Jose Aldo versus Merab Divalishvili. That's a pretty exciting fight. Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold.
Hold on. There's no way that actually happens, right? There's no way Luke Rockhold versus Paulo Costa happens. That fight's not going to happen, surely.
Well, we can pray. I mean, who is more likely to make the walk to the octagon? Luke Rockhold or Leon Edwards?
Oh man. That is okay. You know what? I'll say Leon Edwards is more likely. But I don't know if Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman is more likely.
Yes, unfortunately for Mr. Edwards, it seems like all his title opportunities and big fight opportunities are pretty cursed. But it does seem like this one is finally going to happen for him. And I'm pretty intrigued. I mean, you know, he's gotten a lot better. Kamaru Usman's gone incredibly better. You know, many view him as the pound for pound number one fighter. Very hard to argue against that. So I am intrigued by this matchup, even though we have seen it before.
And Merab versus Aldo likely to determine who will challenge the winner of TJ Dillashaw versus Aljamain Sterling for the next bantamweight championship bout.
Yes, most likely. Unless, what do you think though? If Sean O'Malley can beat Petr Yan, he might jump in queue.
Yeah, I think if Sean O'Malley beats Petr Yan, they would give him the shot, but I'm not expecting that to be the result.
Yeah, I don't think many people are. But
you know what? Sean O'Malley came out and he said, when I beat Petr Yan and I get the next shot, I'm immediately going to award a title opportunity to Jose Aldo Jr. because he's the greatest of all time. So you know what? Sean O'Malley has a fan in Eric Marcotte as of this week.
Wow, he turned you. Amazing. I mean, it wasn't the basketball. It wasn't his jump shot. It was the love for Jose Aldo.
Oh, just as an aside, as we mentioned basketball, I mean, I think we have to say rest in peace to the great Bill Russell, who passed away earlier today. Absolute legend of the sport.
Yes, of course. You know, the Celtics' favorite son. I mean, all-time winningest championships. Is that correct?
Yeah, 11 championships as a player and a coach. Civil rights. That's as big of a part of his legacy as basketball is, if not greater, if we're talking about actual importance. A guy who's the finals MVP trophy is named after. Very sad, but, you know, he lived to the age of 88. That's a full life. All
right. Well, rest in peace, Bill Russell. And on that note, I think we will bid this crowd adieu. Again, my apologies to one Scott Michael Ferry. I didn't realize it would just completely banish you from the YouTube, but hopefully you were able to watch the rest of the show. And thank you to everybody else who tuned in. Thank you to everybody who participated last night in the Discord. Thank you, as always, Eric, for running the polls and helping me out with this show. And we'll see everybody soon. Oh, remember, like the video, subscribe to Post Wrestling. And if you want even more great content, go to patreon.com/postwrestling. All right. Peace out, everyone.